Hello and welcome to the latest of the Paul Doswell Doscast. And as you can see, we've managed to transfer our way to Skype this week. We join more or less everyone else into video conferencing, and the same goes with this podcast. Paul, great to see you this week on the podcast. How have things been the last 7 days or so since we've last spoke?
Well, I persuaded my wife to cut my hair. It's the first time ever that she's cut anyone's hair. And I think she's done all right, to be fair. So even the dog got a haircut. So yeah, it's another strange week has passed in the Doswell house, and it's another week we're trying to almost tick off the list before we can get back to being some normality, really.
Indeed, I think we've all become our own hairdressers, haven't we, the last few weeks or so. Obviously, the big bit of news that came out since we last spoke was the news that the National League clubs have voted to end their season, something which we really didn't see as too much of a surprise.
Yeah, I think that was very much always on the cards. Subsequent to that, we've now received the first proposal from the National League, and we have to respond, with our answer by Friday. And that's a pretty simple question that they've asked us: is would we like to continue with the playoffs, if possible, or not? So that's the first of the 2 or 3 questions that I think we're going to be asked over this next few weeks. And we've got to get our answer back to the National League by Friday. Of course, we're going to be positive about that and say that if we can get back to football, and when we do get back to football, if they view the playoffs as a viable thing to do, then we would very much be happy to be part of it.
I'm assuming that would be a behind closed doors affair. And if that was the case, is there a potential timescale, or is it literally just a case of seeing the options now and then plan further down the line?
No, I mean, it was a good letter from the National League, really weighing out what the Premier League have been doing, what the Championship clubs have been doing. The reality is that the playoffs in front of crowds is what they would hope for, and I suppose the hope for that might be September, October, if we're being hopeful. There was a discussion in terms of the Championship and Premier League clubs about it being behind closed doors and everyone being tested. But I think the reality in non-league is that we don't know how expensive that is, or even if we're able to do it. So we don't know whether it's going to be behind closed doors. Obviously, clearly everyone's preference would be that that supporters can come in and watch it.
And if it was voted against the playoffs, is there perhaps another ballot which says how the season will be determined, i.e. with points per game, free to the table, or even null and voiding, which of course has propped up a lot in circles?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is it's the National League's decision. They want to take opinions from the clubs in all 3 leagues, but ultimately they will come back and make the decision. If, as I suspect, the majority of clubs won't vote for a playoff because it doesn't suit their requirements, because they won't be in the positions where they could have made the playoffs. The next thing they'll be voting on, I think, will be points per game, and whether that points per game is done as is, so the table stands as is, whether it's done as a mathematical equation, where it's done as points per game and averaged. So we would expect another questionnaire, if you like, to come through within the next week or 2 with the second option. Clearly the third option, which none of us want, because it just means all your hard work's finished for the season, is a null and void. But I would suspect that will also be on the table, and see what reaction they get to null and void.
What would be your preference as far as the points per game versus the actual frees on the table? I suppose we're one of the very few clubs that are in a lucky position that our final position wouldn't change between frees and the tables and average points per game, whereas other clubs would have a dramatic rise. I think Barney would go up spots if points per game was introduced, and other clubs would obviously drop some spots.
Like you said, from our perspective, we are one of the highest points per game teams in any of the leagues. Obviously, Wealdstone are marginally in front of us, as are Kings Lynn, but we're in front of York as well. So if you look at the National League in South, we're the 3rd best team in terms of points per games played up to today. The reality is that it could come down to very straightforward points per game. They promote 2 teams from each league, that would be the ideal scenario for our football club, because it means we'd get promoted. But as I said, whether that happens or not, I'm really unsure. But you know, we've had a really good meeting between us all today by Zoom, and you know, if we were asked or invited or won promotion, the wish very much within the club is that we take the promotion if it's ever offered, or if we win the points per game table.
How tough has meetings been between everyone at the club? Because I suppose there's so many things whirling around, and again, such uncertainties with it. Is it almost a case of having a case of a number of different plans in place, because there's so many different scenarios are being thrown up in the air? How difficult is that to plan ahead?
Well, certainly myself and Derek probably speak every day, probably minimum of half an hour. Talk to Trevor Brock regularly during the week as well, because Trevor's obviously dealing with it on the football side. And I've kept in touch with Tim Mellor as well. So, you know, we're all getting used to Zoom meetings now and understanding what a Zoom is. And like I said, they are useful tools, but it doesn't replicate being able to be in front of people and really seeing the whites of people's eyes. I miss that. You know, you miss the contact of people. So the Zoom meetings have been useful, but the FaceTime, which is what I do with Derek, FaceTime, and with Tim and Trevor, it does mean that obviously we are keeping very much in touch with what's going on at the club. And there is a lot going on. You know, we're not just sat back not doing anything. It's trying to plan ahead, and can we make the club come out of this even stronger, you know, when we eventually all do go back to watching football and coming down to the club.
Indeed. And one question I've had a few times through the emails and on Twitter is there a timescale? Is there a potential date for football returning? There was a tweet by Oliver Holt last Wednesday that said that potentially there'll be no non-league games until 2021. Has there been any kind of instruction as to when we could see a return to football? I know obviously at this stage, along with everything in life, it's so up in the air, but are there plans in place, a contingency plan that's being drawn up as to when we could possibly go back, especially in non-league circles?
I think the conclusive answer is that nobody knows. And there's no point in Oliver Holt tweeting 2021 because he doesn't know. You know, we all hope. You're only living in hope. And the hope is that we can start maybe in September, October. I don't believe that, you know, you can't just pluck a month out of the air and say it's going to be January 2021. I don't believe that the lockdown will be able to sustain over a long period of time. I think there'll be lots of easing up of the restrictions from May the 7th onwards. And obviously, you know, one of the things that we've spoken about that we're hopeful for is if you look at Ireland at the moment, there's no social gatherings allowed over 5,000 people. So our view is, you know, hopefully if Ireland do it and it works in Ireland, you know, maybe our government will turn around and say no gatherings over 2,000 people. In which case, for me, non-league football can then get back to playing, because the key thing to remember is without a crowd, that there is no point in us playing. There is no income. There's no wages to pay players, and the joy of football is, you know, the level we're at is to entertain people, and you know, and our fans are a huge part of that.
As you say, that 2,000 would be easy for non-league clubs, even in the National League. A lot of them could sustain that. I suppose the big problem with that would be how you police that, because obviously there'd be nothing else happening apart from probably maybe a few theatre shows, cinema shows, if that was the case. And I suppose if that was a scenario that came up, it'd be about policing that in a correct way.
Well, I think there's an obvious way to do it. You know, we're also spoke today about the season tickets. You know, the chairman again and the board have been, you know, phenomenal really in terms of what they're going to be prepared to offer. I mean, for it to be £99 last year was, you know, it's almost a giveaway. And, you know, the board and the chairman are certainly talking about not putting the season ticket prices up, which is incredible to me. So, you know, people can guarantee a place in the stadium if this was to happen. So if it's a 2,000 capacity, last year we sold nearly 800 season tickets. If people want to guarantee they get in the ground from when we first get back, if they buy a season ticket, then they're guaranteed to get in. I think the other system you then have, let's just say we've got 1,000 season ticket holders, which we would expect, having had such a good season. We then sell the other 1,000 online, and then once those tickets have sold, a bit like the Dorking game, people knew football was coming to an end, so there's a massive surge at the end. But once we've sold those extra 1,000 tickets online, there would be no entry on the day to the game. So that's how you police it. You police it by making it all ticket, basically.
Would there always have to be a segregation put in place? Because what you wouldn't want is people coming down in coach loads, say from, for example, Wealdstones, Maidstones, just coming down, maybe not even getting in on the day, and they're just congregating outside.
Yeah, I think it has to be. When this happens, it will be explained very, very clearly to everyone, including us. And part of that process will be that most of our games, if we're still in the National South, then there won't be segregation. Very few games need to be segregated. So the fact is, if we're back to a situation where the government are allowing 2,000 people, as an example, to mass gather, then it's no problem if those 2,000 people gather, whether it's 2 metres apart at that point, if the government say so, or a metre apart. I think at the end of the day, they'll give an amount of people that can go to any event. And that's one way that we can see that we could get back quicker than perhaps some of the other leagues.
Indeed, let's go to some of our listener/viewer questions. We call it this week. James Nibbs has asked a question. I think we touched upon it a little bit last week, but I'll ask it again this time. If the season doesn't start till 2021, which was what we spoke about with the tweet earlier, would there be a situation that perhaps a lot more members of the team would have to be released because obviously there'd be no income coming in from the gates until then?
Yeah, I think we touched on this subject last week. It's pretty obvious to everybody that that every football club is going to suffer financially. We don't know to what extent until literally we know when we can get back to play, when we know what our sponsors are going to be doing, when we know that the West League can reopen. So unfortunately, sat here today, we don't know. We don't know for sure. But again, we had an excellent meeting today. I've spoken to all the players. They're aware of what's happening. At this moment of time, no player can sign for any club anyway. So that's a question for the future. At the moment, all of our players are furloughed. So they are receiving their money, or 80% of it. And that will continue until we get back to playing or until the government stops the furlough. So at this moment of time, we're probably 2 months, because they said May and June they'll furlough. I think at the end of July, perhaps that's when the question needs to be looked at in more detail.
Indeed, I suppose it's also the added caveat that if we do get, I think we spoke about it on a previous podcast. I don't want to go completely over every single point, but if we did get that gate money those first, second months, you can, I suppose, get back to some kind of normality that we had before the pandemic kicked in.
Again, we're only going to know. I mean, what we're going to do is very clearly err on the side of caution. We're going to offer new players, what we know we can afford. And, to a certain extent, we do know what we can afford because we know what the income streams are into the football club. We might have a great surprise where the crowds double, where the Wesley doubles in its take-ins. And, on that basis, we'd be able to sit down with the players at a later date in the season and say, look, things weren't as bad as we thought. We'll try and improve your situation. But in the early days, it's obvious to everybody, Henry, that sponsorship is going to be hit massively. The club, at the moment, you're starting from a nil income. So it will take you 2 months to even just start to generate the income to pay 1 month's salary. But ultimately, we're a football club that's there for the first team. The chairman backs the first team. He always has done. And I think, we will prosper at the end out of this. I don't think it's a bad thing that non-league wages are going to come down substantially. And I've got no issues, as I said before, I've got no issues working with a lower budget, with a competitive lower budget, because I think every club's going to be in the same situation. So it'll make it more of a level playing field.
Do you think it'd stop the likes of clubs, and I won't go into names, that that kind of bankroll their way to promotions in lower league football? Will that kind of kilter out because everyone's at this, more or less anyway, the same financial loss?
Something we spoke about today, Salford would have continued to do it because they're backed by 5 multi-millionaires and a billionaire.
Mm-hmm.
So they're, Salford are an example of a club that have bought their way through the leagues, and they have enormous backing to continue to do that. You also find in non-league football that you have 5 or 6 chairmen who go bust within 2 years of trying to reach the dream. But in the main, as you said, 99% of business people that own football clubs, chairmans, and that's League One, League Two, National League and ourselves, will be in the same financial difficulty as anybody else in this world. And, it's going to take some real sensible, clever heads to steer us through these stormy waters. And that's why I'm so pleased that I'm at the club I'm at, because, certainly I know Sutton will steer themselves through those waters, as will this football club. And as I said, this might even be an opportunity to come out of the whole thing at the end even stronger, even more together.
Definitely, as I say, we're all on the same level playing field come the end of it. We'll move on. Obviously, last week we spoke about we're going to start the raffles. We have now with the Joe Younger raffle. The last time I checked, and probably by the time this podcast goes out, it would change, but we sold 120 tickets, which is £240 so far over the first 3 days to NHS Together charities, which firstly is great for the NHS. And I know this system is being trialled for more funds to raise to the club on further raffles at a late date.
Listen, I think one of the things that we clearly need to do if the supporters want a decent enough team to watch is we've got to come up with fundraising initiatives for the club. But I thought, and everyone thought, you thought it because it was one of your ideas and Mark Pope's idea, that the first thing that we should do is to support the effort that the NHS have made for us all. I think it's a great idea. I'd like to think that we can hit more than where we're at the moment. It's only just started, but the social media and all the other bits that we're going to try and get out on it. You'd like to think that we'll get close to 500, maybe more than that. So from that point of view, it's fantastic. And it shows that we're trying to do something as well to make our small contribution in that regard. But also it gives us an opportunity to see how that works for maybe one prize a month, which helps raise some money to put into the pot, because at the moment the pot is very much empty.
Indeed, I know with a lot of things, especially technologically, I had a few little teething problems at first, but I can say obviously from having some part in it myself, it's one of the very few things that haven't had any teething problems at all, which obviously is going to help us further down the line. It's going to be an easy way as well to interact with fans, and obviously when you have prizes, it brings new fans in as well, because they always want to win.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most enjoyable things of this week was going on to that, buying a raffle ticket, but more importantly, watching the video of Jonas score all those goals, because I haven't watched it for a long time. So I thought the 8-minute video or 9-minute video you put up with it was, that was a real cheer me up, to be honest, seeing him score all his goals. But we will have each month some real sort of special prizes, where you can come and spend a day with me and Bairdy, being a team talk before the game, at half time, at the end of the game. Probably, some prizes that money just you can't get, because it's the experience. I know Wes Fogden's keen to do something, so there'll be something every month. And this is, I think we've got to be very apparent about it. It's to try and raise money to support the playing budget when we get back. We're not even sort of ruling out the fact that for the first few games, the first few games of the season, especially if the season ticket's going to be so cheap again, that we don't literally put 4 or 5, buckets there so supporters can go and put their change in or a couple of quid in to help, to try and keep this very talented, young squad together. So it is going to take all of us. All of us are either putting in time, money, and obviously the supporters are a massive part of us keeping going.
One thing I can guarantee is that a Bailey Team Talk is definitely a money can't buy prize. I want to go.
Only if we're losing.
Well, yeah. Hopefully you don't.
If we're losing at half time, then it's money can't buy. If we're winning, he tends to say nothing.
There'd be someone on the winner of that prize who kind of wanted a second half comeback, something like that. Obviously, the season finished now. We can kind of reflect philosophically and look back at the season. And obviously, we didn't get the chance to finish it. But Been some good times this season, especially on the road. We've had some fantastic days out, fantastic stories as well.
Yeah, I mean, we playfully, we were playfully tweeting with Liverpool about the away records to see who was going to go to the end. And when Watford beat Liverpool 3-0 and then we beat Dorking, it was, I generally thought the way that it was going that they'd lose to Watford and we'd probably end up getting beat by Dorking. So no one really kept the record, but. No one can underestimate what an amazing achievement that is by the team to go unbeaten away for the whole season. Like you said, some great moments. Probably the Wealdstone game when we were 1-0 down, looked under threat a bit of going 2 or 3-0 down. And then, we had our 300 supporters there that day, loud and proud as well. Funny enough, it was a punch on the nose for them, and we got one back at our place. They brought a big support. They were loud on the day, but so ours were when we went to their place. The Weymouth game, I remember. I thought that was real backs to the wall stuff against a very good Weymouth side on the day. Simon Walton pops up with a great header from the corner. Chaos at the end with all of our supporters, which was brilliant. But then you even remember days like Concord. I remember a lot of the crew went to Concord and got really pally with their bar staff. And you look back at these days and the Dulwich game. So we were under pressure. Going away to Dulwich on a Tuesday night took most of us 3.5, 4 hours to get there. But we all knew how important that night was, or we thought it would be. To score 3 goals in the last 15 minutes. And again. Forgetting the number of supporters, being able to celebrate with those that have made that effort to get there. I think that's what makes it all worthwhile. So some really, really good away days with them. And like you said, it probably we need to talk about it more. The fact that we did stay unbeaten for the whole season in the end. It's incredible.
I think the other thing that I think I've found, because obviously we've all come back into the National League South. The big difference between that and the National League is not the levels of friendliness, but the interaction you can have at National League South level compared to the National League. I think it was only Maidstone away where we had segregation in place. But you go to places like Chippenham, Concord, places like that, where you really are at the heart of the action. Everyone's in it together. You go into the clubhouse, the players go and have a pint in there afterwards. And you really do learn, in a place like that, really what non-league football is all about.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a shame as you go up levels that they start segregating because 99% of games, there's no trouble. Fans get on very, very well. They, to support a non-league club rather than supporting a league club makes you a different type of supporter at times. And the enjoyment factor of meeting other people and talking about their club and what they're doing, I think is very important. And like you said, it was only Maidstone and I think Wealdstone when they came down to us that was segregated. And it would be nice to think if we got in the National League that we don't have to keep segregating because, the amount of trouble is negligible. There are games you have to segregate. But in the main, I'd like to see more and more non-segregation. I think it makes for a much better game.
And of course, going back to action at Wesley Park, obviously the home record probably wasn't what we would have wanted it to have been, but we still had some really, really good nights. I think the midweek games under the lights were quite entertaining, weren't they? The Dorking 6-0 and the night against Weymouth, they were probably some of the real high points at Wesley Park this season.
Well, again, if we'd have just played on Wednesday nights at home, we'd have won the league by about 50 points because we were on, I think we won every game on a Wednesday night. For some reason, and we couldn't quite put our finger on it, but on Saturdays, we weren't finishing the numerous chances, and it was becoming very, very frustrating. But Wednesday night, who can forget the Slough postponement and then subsequently, the Slough replay against a good side? They're a decent, real good, decent side. Slough. I thought the Weymouth game, Josh Taylor threw in the first 10 seconds of the game, and hits the post. 3-2 against Weymouth was a brilliant night of football. But clearly the absolute outstanding one was Dorking because not only, we played some brilliant football that night on the ground, really moved the ball quickly, but the quality of the goals was just out of this world. And Bradley Tarbuck, for me, probably scored the goal of the season. Quite brilliant goal. And if you actually see the build up to that, Chrissy Paul does a brilliant flick into his path for that goal. So, yeah, I think Dorking is the highlight with Weymouths and Sloughs. And that in the main was the Wednesday nights. We got some great crowds as well for the Wednesday night games. I was amazed how many people were there for the Wednesday night games. So, if we could have turned that, it's just the Saturdays at home that for some reason we were drawing too many games. That's for sure.
And yeah, as you say, we had some great Wednesday nights and some great Saturdays. But we can't really talk about this season without talking about penalties, because whenever a penalty was given in a game against Hampton, you guaranteed there was not going to be a goal, because there was a stage where we couldn't score one, and Ross Warner saved every spot kick against him this season.
I mean, I was literally tearing my hair out. And then you'd get comments from supporters as they went past you, why didn't he take it instead? All I can say to you is that when we started, obviously Danny Kedwell was our penalty taker, but he got injured for 14 weeks. Every person who took a penalty had taken a penalty for their previous club as a regular taker. To my knowledge as well, and I know most of the lads knew who they played for, they hadn't missed. So I think Rory Deacon smashed one over the bar, almost went as far as Horndean. Simon Walton, who'd never missed one in a professional career, missed. Anthony Straker, who took them for Bath last year and didn't miss, he missed. Sam Magri, who took probably the worst penalty I've ever seen in my life at Dorking. He'd scored the previous one at away from home, wasn't it? Dulwich.
Yeah, that's the one.
The ever reliable Danny Kedwell missed two as well. He missed one, I think at Dulwich, did he not? First one, which is why Magri took it. So how many penalties did we miss in the end?
I think it was something like 7 or 8 in the end. I think it was about 6 different penalties. We missed penalties. It's
an incredible stat. And like I said, we tried different people. Everyone was confident coming up to take it. But ultimately, you can miss a penalty, and you could take 10 and score 10, but you could also take 10 and miss 2. So, but it was driving me mad, because actually in those games we were drawing most of them. We could have gone in front, especially at home, and that then teams have to come out at us. But every time we missed, it meant they could just stay sat in against us. So, yeah, that was. But the guy we never talk about, and we should always, is, as you said, Ross Warner had the most brilliant season for us, and he's an unbelievable saver of penalties. How many did he save in the end?
I think I counted 6 in the league altogether.
6 out of 6.
Yeah, I think the only penalty he conceded was the one against Pompey in a friendly.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
Exactly. So 6 and 6.
Yeah, I mean, Ross. I've known Ross for many years. Really, really good guy, but more important, as importantly, good in the dressing room. Underrated. Stays under the radar a bit with people, but he's a brilliant goalkeeper for this level. And, thankfully, Ross Warner will definitely be with us next season, that's for sure.
I wonder whether the goalkeeper coach, Jordan Knight, will take his tennis games as the reason why he saved the penalties.
Well, I think, it's interesting. You talk about Jordan Knight, the goalkeeping coach. Jordan came into the club just after pre-season. Really, really impressed with him. Fantastic young goalkeeping coach. Has brought much needed energy and drive into what we do, organisation. Natasha Nolan and Robbo and Jake on the physio side. We've got a young physio team, but they're so on top of everything, very professional again. So, there was a lot of work going into making that team, as best as it could be. And as I said, I think overall, when you think the third best points per game out of the whole of 48 teams, you've got to say that with a new team and the amount of injuries, it was a good season, really good season.
Indeed, and of course, I think everyone at the Hawks is looking forward to 2020, 21, whenever that is. Finally, what's your favourite moment then from last season? It could be on the pitch, it could be a funny off the pitch.
What's my best moment? Probably just my reaction to Bradley Tarbuck's 6th goal against Dorking, because I think it ended about 11 or 12 passes. Just a brilliant strike into the top corner. And I remember looking around at Derek thinking, this is about as good as it could ever get, because the quality of the goals that night, the football we played, the crowd. There's been plenty of funny moments, not many that I can share with you guys. the disappointments, I think we need to talk about disappointments as well, because they do come. The disappointment was going into the Dulwich FA Cup game, losing 3 of the back 4, ending up having to shuffle people out of position. I remember Bailey played left back that day. Simon Walton had to come in at centre half, and getting thoroughly thumped by Dulwich in the FA Cup for the first 60 minutes. And to be honest, it could have been 4 or 5-0 if Ross hadn't kept us in it. And then to get the goal back 2-1, and then we hit the post in the last 5-6 seconds of the game. I was really keen to get through that game, because subsequently Dulwich then pulled Carlisle, which was on TV.
BBC 2, yeah.
And for me, again, that would have been a massive boost for the club in terms of its finances. So the Dulwich game was a real disappointment for me. There were reasons behind it. And like I said, it's when you've got a small squad, but a good squad, when you lose 3 or 4 of your best players from it, and that day in particular, it was defenders. We lost Anthony Straker. I think Magri was not fit, or Robbo wasn't fit, one of those 2.
Benny Reid also broke his...
Benny Reid had broken his collarbone. So when you take 3 out of your back 4, and they're a decent side, Dulwich, on their day, and we just didn't... we didn't look right, and I know why we didn't look right. So that was a disappointment. But I think there's been many more highs, many more highs than those. I've really enjoyed the strike as a key.
Yes.
That's really got going as a season's got going. People really enjoy that. I think, again, that's where non-league is great, because, you can't see all the players in the bar at a Premiership game. They're shielded from you by bodyguards and all the rest of it. Whereas, we've encouraged our players, as part of what they have to do is to come in the bar and socialise, win or lose. And listen, the hardest thing is to go in that bar when you've lost. There's no question about that. There's a couple of times that I didn't go in when we lost, that I got accused of not going in and da-de-da. But, people have to realise as well that I've also sometimes got other commitments. One of those is my dad wasn't well, so I had to take him home from the ground. I remember once at Radio Solent, had waited and waited for the interview. So by the time I'd done it and I got to go in, it had already passed. So it's not always, it's not always easy. As I said, for players, they feel gutted when they've lost the game. They almost can't look supporters in the eye, because that's the way we are as sports people. If you've lost, you hate it. So that's what I'm saying. There's all these different emotional pictures and factors that come into it. But what I would say is, you go into that bar and, our lot are such a friendly, boisterous crowd. You probably didn't hear any of my interviews afterwards, because everyone's so loud. And I had to get used to that, because at Sutton, everyone was very quiet and, everyone wanted to listen. At this place, they just want to see you pull the ball out.
Leap up for you.
And they just want to know if they're going to win any money or not. So, it's been a good learning experience, good curve, but lots of good moments. Richie Pope's given me many funny moments, which again, unfortunately, I can't tell anybody about. Me and Bairdy bickering like old women most of the time. The screaming matches in the dressing room when things aren't quite right, and some of the bits at training. That is what football is all about. And the bottom line is, we had a fantastic group of players who bought into what myself and Bairdy wanted to do. It wasn't easy as well for the players that have been at the club the previous year. They've been relegated, and they were used to a previous management team. So, I thank the Wes Fogdens and Alfie Rutherfords and, Bradley Tarbucks and Chrissy Pauls that stayed with us. And as I said, I think that everyone bought into what we wanted to do and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Indeed, and there was some plenty of great moments, as you said, and hopefully more. And
come on, then, Henry. Give me a couple of your favourite moments.
Favourite moments. Probably the Weymouth 3-2 on the Wednesday night. I thought that was just a remarkable game of football.
Down to 10 men.
Yeah, down to 10 men, backs against the wall. And to be fair, both games against Weymouth, it was backs against the wall. They came at us after going behind on both occasions. The Wealdstone one again, obviously, springs into mind. Probably the Dorking game, the last one. I think we all realistically knew on that day it's going to be the last football we played this season, and it felt like an end of season party. And hopefully further down the line we get to enjoy one of those. I think the players owe the fans a couple of pints at some point anyway.
Yeah, I think one of my favourite moments from you was your infamous tweet.
Oh, what the cross-come shot.
Yeah. Can you just remind us of what that was?
Yes, so we were playing Cinderford in the FA Trophy. And so yeah, low-key game. And I decided to tweet in the 18th minute that Tarbuck had a cross-come shot straight down Hannah's throat.
Yeah, yeah. And that got how many views? Thousands, wasn't it?
It was getting millions now. I think it was going into about 1.5 million.
1.5 million from one of your lovely comments.
Yeah, you'd have another one, but I didn't want to post it because that was going a bit too far probably. But
and I thought some of your commentary this year was fantastic. I remember, sitting not far from you watching the game and listening to you commentate. And when we score, it sounds like one of those Brazilian commentators who goes, "Whoa." So I've got to play thanks to you guys as well. I think yourself and Steve as well. Steve Torman, can't forget Stevie. Again, everyone doing it for the club. But I thought the social media side this year, massively, massive improvement. And I think, the quality of the games that we've done. The next thing I'd like to do is make sure on the highlights that we can actually get commentary onto the highlights. I think that's the next stage. We should be able to do that. And I suppose the only other thing that might happen is if they do ask us with the playoffs to go behind closed doors, that we're able to at least film the game and stream it live to our supporters if that happens. I mean, I know all of us would make sure the technology is in place to allow that to happen. So, as I said, massive credit as well to everyone off the pitch. As I said, the support from the board was outstanding. The staff, I think, were very, very good. But all round, you could just see the club had moved together into a pretty good place, I thought.
Indeed, I think that's a lovely place to finish. Paul, thank you much for your time as ever. We'll reconvene same time, same place next week. Stay safe, and I'll speak to you then.
You too, Henry. Thank you very much.